Today on Light of the Word with Pastor Ray.
I stepped out and I started to do this ministry or these type. The greatest step of faith is the first step. Here I am. And God just goes from there for the rest. We're going to see a progressive revelation, but we would never go any further than take your son if it was, here I am, let me think about what you're going to tell me next. There was a man who was like, what would you like me to do? What is your will? And let it become my will. The greatest step of faith is just the first step and go, here I am.
Open your heart to us, Lord, so we can know your word. We come before you, Jesus. Speak to our hearts as we discover your love for us. How wide, how deep, how far. Pour into us so we can learn to follow. One surrender at a time. You have made the way for us to know you, a path that's straight and right. By the light of the word.
Did you ever feel lesser than or even jealous when you hear stories of great leaps of faith? You hear a missionary speak of their move overseas into a hostile culture, and it's inspiring. But it also makes you feel a little sheepish about your own hesitancy to share at work or school. As Pastor Ray will challenge us in today's message, walking in faith is often a matter of small steps forward in God's will. There may be some big leaps, but it's just as important to make those small daily decisions to live in faith. Well, let's join Pastor Ray in the book of Genesis, chapter 22, for today's edition of Light of the Word.
What a beautiful word that we see here, and he's going to be tested on these two subjects. And it says, and God said. When you read a commentary, it seems good. I don't agree with it. I think it kind of builds a case to make it sound like, oh, wow, this is amazing. God hasn't spoke to him in 30 years, from Genesis 21 to this moment. I don't believe that at all. I mean, it's dynamic if that was the case, because they're like, wow, God didn't speak to him for 30 years, and now he's calling him to take your son, your only son, go to this mountain and offer him as a burnt offering. I don't believe that at all, because that would just, to me, totally dismiss who he is. In Isaiah 41, James chapter 2, we're told that he was a friend of God. You know what friends do? They walk together. Friends text each other. Friends text each other. They email each other. They call each other. They have this continual relationship with each other. They don't go 30 years without talking to one another. And the point I make about that is I believe that Abraham is so in tune with the Lord that he's ready to hear what God has to say. And when God speaks, he responds. And there's this continual relationship. And then God calls him Abraham. I just love that. Verse 1, the beauty of setting this whole rest of the passage up for us, he calls him Abraham. He doesn't call him Abram. He calls him Abraham. As we studied, it's a name change. The name change reflected a character change. It reflected a great change that God did in a man's life. And as we studied that H that changes him from Abram to Abraham, the Sarai to Sarah, it's a Hebrew. In the Hebrew, when it would be pronounced, it's just a h, not the long ha that we do. It's a h. And it was the very same word correlating for the ruach, the breath of God. And it was a simple breath of God that changed this man. It's a simple breath of God that changes you and I. The Spirit of God breathes over us. The Spirit of God enters into us. The Spirit of God resides in us. And now the Spirit of God changes us, the ruach of God. And he's coming to speak to a man who's had his failings, had his faults. We've seen, oh, you're my sister, all those things that we studied. And here he comes. He calls him very clear, Abraham. I'm addressing you as the changed man that you are. I'm not calling you the man that you once were. I'm not calling you Abram to remind you of your past. And this is the beautiful thing that the Lord speaks to us. I don't call you by your last past name. Maybe some of your friends do, some of your family, they always remember who you were before the breath of God took up residence and changed you and worked in you and is moving you from glory to greater glory. He comes and he speaks and he says, Abraham, the changed man. And then Abraham says what only we can say. When we're walking in faith and in tune with the word of God, here I am. And this word and its structure in the Hebrew in this sentence is not just, I'm all ears, speak, I heard you, what would you like to talk about? It literally means of, I hear you, I'm all here before you, I'm not distracted, I'm not checking my phone, and I'm here before you. And then it carries with it, and I'm ready to do what you asked me to do. And there is a place that it takes the Spirit of God in us to come to a place that we're going to go. And that's why I don't think it's 30 years. I think he has this friend of God relationship. What would you like me to do? I'm here. We think faith is great step of faith, whatever it may. I quit my job and I went into the mission field, or, I stepped out and I started to do this ministry or these type. The greatest step of faith is the first step. Here I am. And God just goes from there for the rest. We're going to see a progressive revelation, but we would never go any further than take your son if it was, here I am, let me think about what you're going to tell me next. There was a man who was like, what would you like me to do? What is your will? And let it become my will. The greatest step of faith is just the first step and go, here I am. What would you like me to do? And then he'll take these steps of revelation. But I start with, I am so thankful that he's a God of after these things. Because it doesn't matter where you are, whatever age you are, there is something tomorrow for you that's great and mighty, and you can have life and that more abundant because he's a God that's always on the move, and he's always after these things. What's next? Verse 2 through 6, I see here is, take now thy son. And these amazing correlations of what we're going to read. This book is truly proven, written outside our time domain. We are reading it with the advantage of the New Testament. They would have read this for 2,000 years simply with the Torah Old Testament scriptures. Verse 2, then he said, take now your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I shall tell you. So I'm not going to tell you exactly which mountain till you get there. Then we're going to read this progression that he's going to speak to these type of things. But I love it in that he's going to start with, take now your only son. He has more than one. He has Isaac and Ishmael. And once again, it's as in, I'm not calling you Abram, I'm calling you Abraham. And I'm not saying, take your son Isaac, not your other son Ishmael. He is making this point that's very clear to him. I don't recognize that work of the flesh. I don't recognize you try to help me with Hagar, the servant from Egypt. I don't recognize your failing. I recognize what I promised. I'm talking to you about the promise. I'm talking to you in your new nature, not your old nature. And I'm so thankful that the Lord doesn't sit there and remind me of my past. Remind me of all my fault and failings, whether they were last week or 30 years ago. And he speaks and he says, take now, forget that failing. I don't recognize your work of the flesh or the failing of it. But now I want you to take your son, your only son, and a burnt offering. A burnt offering, as we have studied before and see that this isn't the first burnt offering that's here, but the burnt offering meant full consumption. Totally consumed. There was no, hey, bring some meal and some oil and we'll mix up some bread and we'll fellowship together in this place. Maybe, no, this is total sacrifice. Burnt offering meant totally consumed, and there's nothing more that will be left. You'll take your son, you're going to totally consume, and you got to remember, this is the land of Canaan. These are the Canaanites. Canaanites are doing human sacrifices. He doesn't know that this isn't what it appears to be. We're going to read what he did believe. We'll get there in these type of things. But he's like, I need to take this as a full consumed offering. It makes me think of the rich The rich man in Matthew 19, Jesus said to him, if you want to be perfect, because he said, hey, what must I do for eternal life? And Jesus said, if you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Oh, what a picture we see here with Abraham of, I know it's being asked. You're asking for the greatest of what my greatest treasure, greater than silver and gold and all the worth and the wealth. I like what Oswald Chambers, have you ever want a good accompaniment to your devotion life? I think Oswald Chambers, my utmost, what's it say? My utmost for his highest. I don't read the cover anymore. I just read the chapter. My utmost for his highest. I believe that is second only to the Bible of the most printed Christian literature in the history of our modern time. But I love what he said in one of his readings this week. Never allow anything to deflect you from insight into Jesus Christ. It is a test of whether you are spiritual or not. To be unspiritual means that other things have a growing fascination for you. There's a word. What am I fascinated with? Well, here he is, Abraham. I'm just fascinated with whatever God's called me to do. Even if it means take now my son, my only son that I love, that we'll build on as we look at this. But you know what's happening here? We're going to read picture perfect of Abraham and Isaac, a picture of God the Father and Jesus. But this is just, God is sharing with Abraham what will break his heart. I ask any parent here, if you were given the call, take now thy son. Any of them. Doesn't have to be your only. Take now your daughter. And what those words would resonate through your very being right now. The thought of giving one of them up. The heartbreak and the agony of the thought of one of our children. And here's what the Lord, he's communing with his friend Abraham as we read. I'm going to share my heart of what's going to happen to me 2,000 years. As I take my son and put him on this exact spot for sacrifice. And what is going through my heart. And here God's sharing and he's communing with Abraham of this is what is to come. You know what? God will share his heart with those who care. It's a great place in prayer. Father, would you break my heart of the things that break your heart? And he'll share that with you. This is what breaks my heart. That person over there is lonely. That person's suffering through the worst anxious moment of their life because of the situation. Oh, they feel they're all alone and nobody sees them. Lord will speak and go, that person over there, they don't know me. They're perishing. It breaks my heart that anyone would perish. I wish none would perish, that all would seek repentance. And then we come to, well, here I am. You share your heart with me. Your heart becomes my heart. What would you like me to do? Oh, the picture that's being painted here, the beauty of it. But then we start getting into these things that can only come from outside of our time domain. Verse 2 again, then he said, take now your son, your only son, whom you love. We're 22 chapters. We're 22 chapters into the book of Genesis. God created the heavens and the earth for man to occupy so that he can meet man and have a relationship with man. And we're 22 chapters and we come to the first time love is mentioned in Genesis. First mention. Notice, we've seen plenty of marriages. We've seen plenty of what we see. If you were to define love today, it's immediately love between a husband and a wife. The next level is love between a mother and a child because the mother's love. But isn't this something, the first mention of love is between a father and a son. It's the first mention and it's painted here perfectly. You get to the New Testament, you would think it would just start with love. Isn't it amazing when you look at Matthew, Mark, and Luke? Here we go. First mention of love in the New Testament. Matthew chapter 3, verse 17. At the baptism, this is my beloved son. Agapetos, unconditional love, agapetos. Mark chapter 1, verse 11, this is my beloved son. First mention of love in Mark's gospel. First mention of love in Luke's gospel is, again, Luke chapter 3, verse 22. This is my beloved son. All three places painted perfect. First mention of love is the love between a father and the son. And then the amazing picture that we see here that's painted for us, the first mention of John, in John, of love, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever should believe shall not perish but have everlasting life. This book, written outside the time domain, our God speaking and showing us the love. The definition of love is the love between the Father and the Son, and the definition of love is the one 2,000 years ago of the Father giving his only begotten Son so that he might communicate to you and me, this is how much I love you. First mention, verse 3 says, so Abraham rose early in the morning. Look at this movement. He probably didn't sleep, but it's interesting. Well, we won't read of Sarah in this. Surely you would think she's coming. I don't know what that communication was, but it says, so Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and he split the wood for the burnt offering and rose and went to the place of which God had told him. So now God's given this revelation. He's given this is where we're going to go, and he'll get there, and we know it's going to be Mount Moriah. Just so there's no confusion of it, 2 Chronicles 3:1, just so there's no mistake, Mount Moriah is Golgotha. 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 1. Now Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where the Lord had appeared to his father David at the place that David had prepared on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Whole story there in 2 Chronicles. New Testament, the place, that place. Luke chapter 23, verse 33, and when they had come to the place called Calvary, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on his right hand and one on the other side. The exact place is what we're reading here. This is like one of the greatest stories ever told. You know, when people want to challenge that we have blind faith, it's like, let me read Genesis chapter 22 to you. You tell me that this isn't written outside of time domain. Golgotha, also known as Calvary, also known as Mount Moriah, also called the place of skulls. But all of these, 2 Chronicles, what we just read, it wasn't a cliff like this. It sloped. So it was a slope up. And the reason it's cliffed out is what we just read is this is where they would go and hewn the rocks out for the temple. Then they would take these stones that were cut here, and then they would take it and build the temple. So this was a gradual incline. And where we go with that is when he's coming with his son, he's going to go all the way to the top. He's not going to stop. In the Canaanite culture and all that, the sacrifices were all the way at the top. And then you can't make it up. You can't just search it for yourself. Don't believe anything I say. 777 meters. You can't make that up. It's amazing that we see what we see here in this place. Well, verse 4, then on the third day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. That's a long 3 days. Probably wasn't much talking. Boy, Dad sure is being quiet. Hebrews chapter 11, though, this is amazing. So I don't have to guesstimate. I can tell you what Abraham knew for these 3 days. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promise offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called. Concluding, verse 19, that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. The whole picture's figurative. But for 3 days, this historical event happened. They're walking, and for 3 days, Abraham's processing this. You promised through my son would be the promised seed of the nations all the way to the Messiah. You want me to offer him, and if I do, then that would mean you'd have to raise him from the dead, or you'd kill all the promises of God, or yes and amen. For 3 days, he's going with this place of, I don't know how this is going to work out, other than you're going to have to do something miraculous, because you can't fail your word, or else you wouldn't be what we just read, the everlasting, almighty, sufficient, most high God. If you're everlasting, you're the same yesterday, today, and forever. Somehow you'll have to raise him from the dead. And and I find a great place in this, because when I sit there and I look at myself in the mirror, I look at 33 years, and I know there's still an after these things and a great life to come should the Lord tarry. But there's a place that I can look in the places of my life that really came to, if you said that he who began a good work is going to be faithful to complete it. If you said, Lord, I'll never leave you nor forsake you, that means right now at this moment, even if it is the lowest place in my life, you can't fail me. You must still stay with me. You must still pick me up and complete what you began in me. And you can take it into your ministries, your marriage, and anything that God calls you. I cannot fail you, or else I would have failed my word. And there is this great place as we look at this story of what you did then, you do today, because you're the everlasting, not unchanging God. And then verse 5, one more. And Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. Do you notice the plural? We're coming back. I'm being called. He didn't tell them what they're doing, but me and my son are coming back. He is by faith before he even enters in. Somehow, some way, we are coming back. And then amazingly, here we are, 22 chapters in, and it comes to this place once again. First mention of worship in the Bible. You would have thought there would be worship after creation. You'd have thought there'd be the clearly defined worship after the flood and stepping off. All these things you think we would read worship somewhere before, but no, here's the first mention of worship. And what the word worship means? To bow down. I know we look at it raising holy hands and singing and praising, and that is worship. But the ultimate act of worship is being defined here for us, just as the ultimate description of love is defined, a father and a son. The ultimate definition of first mention of worship is we're going to bow down. I'm going to bow down. I'm going to yield myself to whatever the will of God is. And that's the ultimate worship. Singing's wonderful. I love it. But there's a place that I can sing, but then God gives me a challenge. I want you to go do this tomorrow. I want you to go do this today. And it's like, oh, I'd rather sing. God's like, no, I'm going to call you to something hard. And that hard might be dying to yourself, might be doing the dishes. It takes more Holy Spirit to do the dishes, to love and to serve and these type of things. But we'll come back, and verse 6 says, so Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and here's picture perfect, and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and the two of them went together. So here's the wood picture put on the son. The son, Jesus, carries the wooden cross. But what's Abraham carrying? The fire, symbolic of wrath. The knife, symbolic of a judgment to come.
You have made the way for us to know you, a path that's straight and right. By the light of the word.
Today's edition of Light Up the Word has been in Genesis. Have you noticed the recurring themes mentioned in this opening book of the Bible? Pastor Ray's walking us through each situation and event, but what about the fact that it often seems like there are two brothers who are at odds? One is looked on favorably by God, and the other doesn't feel like he has God's blessing, so he takes matters into his own hands. This occurs with Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers. There's something about the sin nature that seeks to gain a claim one way or another. But if it's not what God has in mind, it leads to all kinds of heartache and destruction. So what's the lesson that we could learn from these stories that seem to repeat? God has his ways and reasons for doing what he does. But we could rest in the fact that perhaps what God's communicating is that it's not the firstborn lineage that matters, but it's that spiritual birth that comes later, through knowing Him, that really matters. That is what God can bless, and He desires to see your heart for Him grow and flourish. If that concept causes you to pause and think for a little bit, that's okay. While you're doing that, head over to lightoftheword.info. There you'll find lots of resources. This has been Light of the Word, illuminating the heart of God.
You have made